Hello and welcome! My name is Meepolis, they, he, she, and today we're looking at and talking about Other Boys by Damian Alexander, published by First Second in 2021. Categorized on WorldCat as juvenile literature, I would add content notes for bullying, off-page physical abuse and death of mother, and homophobia/homophobic slurs. Clicking over to his website, quote, Damian Alexander is a cartoonist and storyteller who grew up near Boston, a graduate of Simmons College MFA program in writing for children, a John Lasher Memorial Award winner, and a Lambda Literary Fellow. He has also worked with Dr. Martens, The Trevor Project, Hot Topic, The Huffington Post, ATTN, and others. When Damian is not doodling or making comics, he loves gazing into his Victorian dollhouse, watching animated movies, reading comics and ghost stories, all while trying to keep his plants alive. He lives in sunny California with his husband Kevin, their far too floofy cat Alfalfa, and their much too energetic golden doodle Hogarth. Damian is currently working on the sequel to Other Boys. In his free time, he also works on Totally Crushed, an ongoing webcomic. End quote. What keywords came to mind reading this book? Family, silence, play, and cats. Circling back to WorldCat, the summary they use for Other Boys is, quote, Damian is the new kid and he has a foolproof plan to avoid the bullying that plagued him his whole childhood. He's going to stop talking. Starting on the first day of 7th grade, he won't utter a word. If he keeps his mouth shut, the bullies will have nothing to tease him about, right? But Damian's vow of silence doesn't work. His classmates can tell there's something different about him. His family doesn't look like the kind on TV. His mother is dead. His father is gone. And he's being raised by his grandparents in a low-income household. And Damian does things that boys aren't supposed to do, like play with Barbies instead of G.I. Joe. Kids have teased him about this his whole life, especially other boys. But if boys can be so cruel, why does Damian have a crush on one? End quote. Side note, looking at all my recent reviews and what I've been reading and life in general, my goal now is to try and read some more comedic and lighthearted work. That said, this was definitely one of those children's books that also works for people of all ages. An engaging and colorful story. Other Boys tackles some really difficult parts of Alexander's life, providing a window for some and a much-needed mirror for others. A story that centers Alexander's disconnect with gender norms. Other Boys is an example of how violently these norms can be enforced even when you have key adults in your life that are supportive. A growing understanding of his own sexuality was also pretty central and similarly fraught in Other Boys. As someone who grew up in a fairly homophobic Christian place, I appreciated that Alexander highlighted the ways that his secular world told him that being gay was wrong, even before he knew what that word meant. Of course, when he finally comes out to his therapist, and she immediately accepts him, this was just so uplifting. Class, status, and money were also talked about a lot more than I generally expect, with Alexander going to a new school in 7th grade where the disparity between his family's class and those of his classmates is obviously wider, and a lack of resources does impact some of their choices. Ability and disability were similarly highlighted by Alexander being very upfront with the way that bullying impacted his mental health and some of the coping mechanisms he came up with. I also tried to just stop talking in school around the same time, but was not nearly as successful. Not that that really stops bullies. And while not a focus of Alexander's story, Damian's world is not just a sea of white people and is populated by people of diverse racial groups, albeit largely in the background. To conclude, there were a few places where, in the details, this felt like an early work, but not really to its detriment, just interested to see how Alexander's work continues to develop. This is a really hard story to tell, particularly for children, but a lot of children are stuck in really tough situations and need to see that they aren't alone. 5 stars. Bye y'all, keep reading and organize to end capitalist oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, non-Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.